light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Eric Breault of Quantum Tones Healing. And the topic we picked to discuss today is contrasting stewardship in relation to ownership and what ownership really means. Perhaps a good place to start would be an amusing a joke that I heard a while back of someone who supposedly argued with God about the ability to, quote, take it with you. All this wealth that he accumulated during life, he didn't want to have to just leave it when he died. He wanted to bring it to heaven with him. And he argued with God incessantly, and finally God said, okay, fine. If it means that much to you, you can bring it along with you. And so he lives this life, accumulates unbelievable amounts of monetary resources, and dies and has it all buried with him. And he shows up at the pearly gates to meet St. Peter, dragging this big chest behind him. And Peter says, wait a minute, you can't bring that in here. And he says, oh yes I can, I got special permission, go check. So Peter calls up to the front desk and finally comes back from the phone and says, yeah, they said you can bring it in, I guess, but you went to so much trouble, do you mind if I ask what you've got in there? And the guy very proudly throws the lid open, and Peter looks at this chest that's just heaping with gold coins. And after a long pause in utter astonishment, he finally looks at the man and says, your treasure is pavement? You know, that's what we use to pave the streets up here. I mean, it would be like somebody coming to this world and talking about their wondrous treasure, and you open the chest and it's nothing but a box full of asphalt. You know, that's what we use to pave our streets. Things are valued differently, but it's this question of, you know, what do we really own? Because there is nothing that we get to take with us. So there's, from a certain perspective, everything we have in this life is simply on loan. And whenever we're gone, it will be given to somebody else.
Even our bodies.
Even our bodies. Even our relationships.
Yeah.
The challenge of people who are married for decades, and one dies and the other lives for another 10 or 20 years. And even that relation, even the people we love, we don't get to keep. Their lives overlap for certain periods of time. Possessions come into our control and influence for a certain period of time. But what do we really own? I don't know that we really own anything. But for purposes of society, we have certain rights and responsibilities, certain ways of making choices. But it's never really ours. I mean, that's where I try to explain to people that it's not my money, it's not your money, it's the world's money. And the world will keep it. Just like a Monopoly game. You're issued a certain amount of money at the beginning of the game, and you get more money or less money as the game proceeds. And at the end of the game, the money stays with the game. It doesn't go with you.
You know, all the resources that we have on this planet don't come with us. Don't. Especially when people think more on the line of materialistic point of view, that's a challenge for them. They want to take things with them. They wish they could, you know, and they want to take their loved ones with them when they die, or they want to, you know, take there's certain things with them, but they can't. You can't bring it home with you. The only thing I could see you bringing with you, but I don't think it's considered ownership, I think it's just your experience.
Mm-hmm. The memories. Well, and I'm one of those who likes to believe that we will meet our relationships in heaven also. Mm-hmm. You know, be it with people or with animals or you know, or both, or, you know, the memories are there and the love of the relationships is there. but in the sense of having it where I can control it, no. I mean, people and animals come in and out of my lives with and without my permission. I mean, I can invite people into my life, and they may come in or they may delay coming in.
In a rare case, you have a couple that die in a car crash. That's a very rare case.
Where they both leave at the same time.
Yeah.
But then it still leaves the question of who do they leave behind.
Yeah.
I mean, there are extremely few people who enter and exit this life with no relationships whatsoever. Extremely few. Even the child that is immediately given up for adoption still had a mother. Even if it is not more than a brief overlap at the very beginning, there is still a relationship that makes it possible. In looking at this question of what, after all, is the definition of ownership, to me it makes more sense to talk about stewardship. That what we have and the relationships with which we interact is much more about how we develop, how we nurture, what we learn, and what good can we do with these resources more than somebody else could? Because nobody reads your balance sheet at your funeral. You know, nobody cares whether you had a lot of money or a little, unless they're the ones fighting over it after you're gone, which is really not a very loving thing. But
No.
it's about how much good did you do? How much did you bless the world? How much did you develop as a person while you were here?
It's all about experience, journey, about what you've learned, what you've gathered, what gifts that were given to you, and in a sense of spiritual gifts that were given to you through your experiences, through the wisdom you've gathered, and the encounters, spiritual encounters with specific people, give you important information you take with you.
If we think of things only as physical, it becomes this question of, yes, but can we take it with us when we ourselves cross back into spiritual realms? I think it's widely agreed that we take memories, that we take capacities for love and so forth. In wrestling with this question of stewardship versus ownership, to me it kind of comes down to the question of, so what do we do while we're here? And what really matters? And I think there's a lot of people who would say what matters most is the good that you can do. Who do you bless? Or do you live in a very selfish way while you're here? A more fundamental way that I sometimes phrase it, that I actually put into one of the morality plays I wrote, is to wrestle with the question of what kind of person will you show yourself to be? The resources that we have here that may be ours to borrow, maybe ours that we supposedly own for some limited amount of time, those are so that we can show what kind of person we are. It's not the having of it that means anything, because we don't get to keep it. It's what we do with it to show what kind of person we are.
In those moments we share with other people, precious moments, or especially moments where you help an old lady cross the road, or you do a favor for somebody, but don't expect anything in return, or helping a child with his or her homework, and being a teacher as well as a student on this planet is how we exist in this reality, is to share, teach, learn. Those things are qualities that are important that we bring with us. Because living in this kind of dense reality gives us, I have a knowing that it allows us to grow much more quicker, because we are faced with many challenges, many lessons that allow us to expand and see in a higher perspective.
Yeah, and on that note, I don't know that I'm any better than anyone else when I'm going through difficulty about being cheerful or grateful for it. I'm as grumpy as the next person, and why did this have to happen, and so forth. And I sometimes look up and complain. All of life doesn't have to be about frustration, because it seems to be one of the most common things I experience. And yet it's in the retrospect that I'm inclined to concede that I'm more of a person for the sake of, for having gone through that difficulty. That somehow it, I don't know, made me tougher, made me stronger, made me more resourceful, made me come up with a solution I never would have come up with otherwise.
And it just allows you to see in a different light. Some people just fall into it and never get out of it because they sort of give up on it. And other people like yourself and I, because we're so spiritual and we're so persistent,
Okay.
and in our faith and our beliefs, that we feel a mistake is an opportunity for us to shed light on something, to grow.
Does that mean you don't get grumpy or frustrated or angry or?
It doesn't mean no. It just it makes you realize some of the weaknesses that are there, and it makes you realize, okay, you need to honor those weaknesses, and also you embrace it. And then when you embrace it, it allows you the opportunity to overcome that lesson that's taking place.
I would suggest that the embracing usually happens afterwards rather than during.
Yes, after. So after we go through the process of this emotional process, the challenge, then being emotional, and then, okay, wait a minute, I need to step back and breathe a little bit. Okay. All right, it's time for me to move on and move beyond this and let it go. And say, okay, thank you for showing me part of myself I'm not. I always say that, thank you for showing me part of myself I'm not, because some of the lessons are there to show us a weakness, but in essence that weakness is not who we are. That weakness is there to show us something, this limitation that we're...
Remembering that I'm bigger than this moment.
Yes.
This moment is only one moment in the midst of a million moments that comprise my life. And it's all the moments together that begin to show more of who I am holistically. But it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, I'm so spiritual that I don't deal with that, or I'm so spiritual that I'm above that. And that would be a very condescending sort of interpretation that I don't think is true of either of us. And so I hope nobody gets that impression that, in one sense, having a conversation about stewardship and ownership here is very safe. We are not face to face with any particular problem other than coming up with interesting things to say and insights to share. We don't have to deal with the problem right smack in front of us. And so we can talk about it in a very disconnected, distant, casual sort of way. When I'm trying to build something and it's not cooperating, I sometimes jokingly tell people, yes, I got it done, cussing and swearing all the way. When I'm nose to nose with a problem, I'm as human as the next person. Where the real growth happens, I think, though, is when afterwards I find that moment where I step back by my choice, take a deep breath, spiritually focus, and begin, without any disrespect, but with open, inquisitive honesty to ask, what was that all about? And to listen for the answers.
You get that, sometimes you get that feeling, okay, now you know what to do. Now you know okay, this is what I did. I see it for what it is. I know what I need to bless it and move on. But there are some people that just don't do that. They just fall. There are these people who commit suicide. They have to carry that with them, that experience. That's a very traumatic experience for a soul to cross over from that experience. So that that energy needs to be resolved.
Well, and resolved in the people around the person who crossed over too.
Yep.
At the same time, I don't want to cast judgment upon people who have committed suicide. I interpreted that they had reached a point of severe powerlessness and frustration and pain that they simply couldn't deal with it anymore. I have no judgment for them. but it's a sort of earthquake where everybody around them has to adjust to how the landscape has changed. I'm sorry that the world continues to create circumstances where people would ever feel that way. And I think in that sense it's somewhat of a collective responsibility, but there's no one individual, people want to say, if only I had, maybe it would have been different. Well, maybe not. Maybe there were so many things contributing to it that no one person could have made the fundamental difference in the outcome. But we're trying to improve this world bit by bit, I hope.
Yeah, and helping those that are going through these challenges. Some people just don't have the resources. In my case, I've been in that state of depression and state of that energy, that suicidal energy. And when you're in that space, and I wondered, and it was like almost like the dark night of the soul. I asked for guidance in that moment. Suddenly received a message, an inner message saying, Eric. And it was like a sense of energy that flowed through me, that trusting energy. Thankfully, I had the spiritual resources before I fell into this deep space to help me realize, okay, life can be better, even at the darkest point in your life. You have cases like Robin Williams, who had committed suicide. And
the actor Robin Williams, yeah.
Yeah, he's been up and down all his life.
Had some incredible accomplishments.
Yeah, and helped a lot of people intuitively.
But I don't remember who said it, but I remember reading someplace where someone said, the problem with life is that it is so daily. It's the dailiness, it's the moments, it's the getting up in the morning and the toast got burnt because the toaster didn't work right, or whatever it is, some whole list of things where at some point it feels overwhelming. The times in the past when I felt suicidal, I would describe it as a place of radical disempowerment where I had lost the ability to see any positive options. And sometimes it was because circumstances had become so adversarial and I was trying to find a way to do anything to make life better, and everything I tried failed. Every door I knocked on was closed. Every person I asked said no, to where I finally threw up my hands and said, well, then what am I supposed to do here? I suppose what I hadn't considered is that at those points, if I wanted to, I could have just put what I could carry in a backpack and just walked out the door and in search of some new opportunity. Each individual experiences it differently, but it kind of comes back to this question of stewardship and ownership, because people want to think of themselves as owning their bodies, and to some extent, I would say, yeah, with certain limitations, but it kind of comes back to this stewardship thing of having a resource of myself and asking, what is the most I can do with this? And if everybody says no, is there something else I could do with this? And if all the opportunities are gone, is there something else I could do with this? If the challenge is take a backpack or whatever you can carry, walk down the highway, find somebody who needs help. Don't care if it's someone who is changing a tire or if it's a farmer who needs help in the field, whatever it is, just find somebody who needs help and help them and see what flows from there. I mean, there's all sorts of different wacky creative ways of dealing with it. If anyone were to ever reach that point of feeling suicidal, that would be a way of setting off in a new direction of infinite possibility. Yeah. The other area none of this touches on, however, is those who, whether because of pharmaceutical substances that they've used to try to cope with out-of-control emotions or brain imbalances or whatever, there are chemical imbalances that create negative thought. But to me, that kind of comes back to the whole stewardship thing again. We want to be the best stewards of our bodies that we can be, to maintain them in as healthy a state as possible. And part of that is finding effective ways to be the stewards of our thoughts and emotions, rather than putting them on autopilot and not worrying about them. I guess the other area we haven't really touched on that much when we talk about ownership is the people who want to say, I can do whatever I want with this because it's mine. And I would say, well, kind of, sort of, you get to decide, but it's not yours to keep.
Temporary.
It's the world's money, it's not your money. You get to decide what will happen to it from now until whenever your life runs out. And you can do good things with it, you can do bad things with it, you can do selfish things with it, you can do philanthropic things with it.
That's where free will comes in with that.
there's all sorts of possibilities.
People just identify themselves with materialistic things. When they do that, they become lost into the greed, hatred, attachment, obsessed with the materialistic point of view, to the point that they get lost into it, and they have.
Well, and it becomes a sort of psychosis of its own.
Yeah, they become selfish.
But not being attached to it doesn't necessarily mean giving it all away. In a sense, I think the blessings that comes to us, it's as if we're being given an invitation to develop it. Here is a responsibility for you. Will you accept it? When I was a kid, there were a lot of the neighboring farms around us. There would be times where the father would give one of his children a calf or a hog to raise, and they would take care of it every single day and take it to the fair and maybe win a blue ribbon for how well they had done or something. But the whole point being that on a very, very small scale, he was giving them an opportunity to learn how to be a farmer, how to be responsible for a single animal. It was a gift in a sense. They owned it, but they were kind of the steward of it because they weren't going to keep it indefinitely. And if they tried to keep it indefinitely, they would inevitably outlive it because animals don't live as long as people. I mean, farm animals. So it's ownership that in practice is really stewardship.
That's a good lesson. I think a lot of that needs to be taught, especially with children, because they're vulnerable and they learn from their experiences and what their environment that they live in. And when they experience that, so they realize, okay, it's not really mine.
If you define yourself according to ownership, you kind of set yourself up for failure. If you are only who you are because of what you own, the minute you stop owning that, you cease to exist. I mean, there's nothing to say that you're there anymore.
Yeah.
The witticism somebody coined of, if you are what you do, when you don't, you're not. If somebody says, I own a plumbing business, that's who I am. I'm the owner of the plumbing business. That's who I am. So when they retire and they're no longer the owner of the plumbing business, who are they? There've been a lot of people who have, at that sort of transition in lives, look in the mirror and say, I don't know who I am. So they essentially set themselves up for a delayed catastrophe.
Yeah, when you're in that state of ownership, focusing on that ownership, focusing on the money in the business, not paying attention to who you are in essence, which is what goes with you when you die. That essence.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you're a steward,
yeah.
In contrast,
yeah.
who you are goes on from one stewardship to the next, to the next, to the next. And what makes you a distinctive steward of whatever resources cross your path is the ways that you manage each different thing that you manage. Mm-hmm. You could go through 4 different careers. You could go through a succession of farm animals that you own. You could go through a succession of cars that you own.
Different relationships, different geographical addresses. On paper, you may be designated the owner, but if you understand that you're really just the steward, you know that when your ownership of that thing stops, you'll simply become the steward of something else. You don't lose yourself because you're not enmeshed with that particular ownership. With that non-attachment to the thing, you become more humble, more blessed for the way things are.
But non-attachment doesn't mean a lack of concern.
No.
Because you're still concerned for it, you're still responsible for it, but you allow it to be what it is, to come and go as it needs to you steer it in the wisest possible direction.
It's just honoring it, respecting it, that
Mm-hmm.
the way it, and
by doing a good job, you honor both the thing and yourself.
Yeah. And that's important. It's very critical in order for us to continue with life with gratitude. When you're grateful for the things that are offered to you and to your surroundings, that are given to you as gifts. You see objects as gifts. They're not yours, but they're resources to help you on your journey, even if it's 10 years or even just a week. They're there for you to
whether it's 50 years or 5 minutes, it's still the question of, so what did you do with it?
What you've learned from it, what you've gathered from it, what you've...
how much love and wisdom you were able to infuse into it.
And not...
We're just about out of time. So final thoughts as we I mean, there's never a final word to a discussion. These are
No,
all
there isn't.
ongoing discussions. But hopefully we've said some things in the last half hour to give people ways of thinking about it for themselves.
It's important to move beyond identifying ourselves with material objects and material things.
Even bank accounts.
Yeah, even bank accounts.
Yeah, your net worth doesn't tell me who you are.
And this identity is not really who you are, it's what's within us really who you are.
Yeah.
Label
This
that we
is-
give ourselves.
This is a mask I wear for however long this life lasts.
Yeah.
In the soul, we have capacities for love and wisdom that the body could never contain. Thank you very much for everything you shared today.
Sister Who.
And thank you for watching. I hope it's been an insightful, inspiring half hour for you as well. And may you be blessed in your own lives as you continue to develop these ideas further.